I'm a sensory scientist originally from France. I studied in Burgundy. I traveled a bit, in the wine regions in France, but then moved at the end of the last century to to the US, to Modesto, California. Stayed in the US, moved to Canada later on. I'm an academic researcher as well as I work in the industry, and developed this appreciation for the wine people, the wine folks, especially on the technical side. I went back to the US to work from the largest non-alcoholic beverage producer in the world, not mentioning the brand, but I'm in Atlanta, so you can guess, and pursue my career along those lines. But at the beginning of this month, I said, well, wine is my calling. I have to do something, and I love educating about sensory science. I love, sharing what I've learned along the way.
Hey friends, welcome to the Taste, Toast, Travel podcast. We're your hosts and resident foodies and lovers of all things travel and exploration.
Grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and enjoy the journey with us.
Isabelle, welcome to the Taste, Toast, Travel podcast. I'm very happy to have you here, and I've really been looking forward to this conversation. I think the work you do, honestly, I just find so fascinating, and both my husband and I kind of nerd out on it. Obviously, we work in the wine industry, so we have a great appreciation for wine. My husband, the co-host, who is not here right now, is a sommelier, so I know he's definitely very in tune and in touch with the five senses, and honestly, he has a much better gauge on smell and the senses and things even than I do. He can pick out some things that I'm like, where are you getting that from? I don't know. But I find it fascinating. I think it's a really cool science, and you have just such an interesting story, and the work you do is really cool. So very excited to get into this, but just wanted to first welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tara. And I'm sorry your husband is not around, but happy to have a conversation with him, offline. But thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, you can educate me today at least, because he knows what he's doing. So
all right,
get something
let's
out
do
of
that
today. I love it. Well, I love to start these conversations by just having you tell us and listeners just a little bit about yourself. And we will definitely get to the work that you do. And I mentioned this in the intro, but little spoiler alert, you are a wine sensory consumer scientist, I believe. Is that correct? I definitely want to get to that. But outside of that, can you just tell us some fun facts about you? And it could be, just where you're from, what you like to do for fun, things like that.
Yeah, happy to do that. So my accent is not from the South. I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm originally from France, Champagne. And I grew up in France. I studied in France and then moved to the US after my PhD. So maybe a fun fact is that it was a tradition in my family, so no judgment, please. For my christening, my grandma put a drop of champagne on my lips. I was 6 months old, and somehow it probably created, my destiny that, I was meant to work on wines and to be a sensory scientist. So that's how I interpret, the story that I was told. Obviously, I don't remember. But yeah, that's how it all started. So I'm a sensory scientist. We can talk about what it means later on, but originally from France. I studied in Burgundy. I traveled a bit, in the wine regions in France, but then moved at the end of the last century to to the US, to Modesto, California, where I took a job with the largest winery at the time, domestic winery at the time, as a sensory scientist to create their program. And I know that the podcast is all about culture and travel, so I had a lot of stories to share about, the cultural shock that I experienced there, but it was such a great experience. So, stayed in the US, moved to Canada later on. I'm an academic researcher as well as I work in the industry, and developed this appreciation for the wine people, the wine folks, especially on the technical side. They are so generous, and I just wanted to, to work with them. And then 11 years ago, I went back to the US to work from the largest non-alcoholic beverage producer in the world, not mentioning the brand, but I'm in Atlanta, so you can guess. I pursue my career along those lines. But at the beginning of this month, I said, well, wine is my calling. I have to do something, and I love educating about sensory science. I love, sharing what I've learned along the way. And yeah, that's my story in a few minutes.
Oh my gosh. There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, just so envious of where you are from in France. Such a beautiful area. I think I've only been to Paris. I know John's been to a few more places, but it is high on our list to go, and we love French wine. So that's amazing. And so funny that you were near Modesto. We are in Northern California as well. We're in like the Sonoma Napa area. So not horribly far from us. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So talk to me. Let's get into the wine sensory experience and being a scientist. So taking us back a little bit, I mean, clearly this was like in the stars for you, or at least since the age of 6 months, right? But how did you get into this work? How did you, I mean, of all the things that you could have done with this, why a wine sensory consumer scientist?
Well, originally I wanted to be a winemaker, and being in France, I attempted to go into the National Diploma of Enologist, called DNO in France, and it didn't work out in terms of timing, and also it was kind of a closed environment. So if you're not from, the trade, it's difficult to go in.
Sure.
And I ended up doing flavor research on food products. And I still had, my mind, I want to go back to wine. I want to go back to wine.
Yeah.
And during 8 months, I studied the flavor of strawberry jams, a fascinating topic. And part of the project was, for me to analyze the flavor compounds of the jam. And the other part was to work with the sensory science team to have the jams that I was making tasted by people to understand, how they were perceived differently. And then when I was exposed to this part of the work, I said, well, I don't want to be a lab rat. I want to work with people. Although I'm, very introvert and, it was not my, nature, but I really found it fascinating to work with people and to understand what they were perceiving when they were smelling, tasting, and how they were able to describe those sensations. And this is what, sensory science is about, is understanding how we human beings, interact with products, whether they are food products, beverages, personal care products, how do we perceive through our senses those products? And this is very important in terms of product development. When we want to launch a new product, we want to satisfy the end consumer, so we really want to make sure that those sensory perceptions resonate with the brand, resonates with the expected benefits, etc.
Right.
And that's why it's a very important component of the development of a product. But sad to say, it's very hidden in the research and development, area. And, I'm still explaining, what I'm doing or what I've been doing for the last 30 years to people because it's not really known. So
Right.
a part of what I'm doing right now, I really want to be an advocate for this science as well.
I love that. And just make it more probably understood, and I hate to use the word mainstream, but just just how people can actually, that leads me to a question I have for you. So because what I was going to say was like, how we can be more aware of our senses and how they, how we consume and how we experience things. So how can people harness their taste preferences or their smell preferences, kind of however you want to word this, to inform what they buy or the experiences that they partake in? I'd love to like focus on wine in a moment, but like if there's anything just overall you can shed some light on there. I just find that so fascinating.
Well, our education has really focused on the sense of vision. So we take a lot of decisions based on what we see, the shape, the price, the label, the information. So all these external cues, this external information of the product. And we haven't learned, over our upbringing to pay attention on what we smell or what we taste, except that, we taste a strawberry yogurt, so it must taste strawberry, but we don't really pay attention. And only when you get a cold, suddenly you realize, doesn't taste anything. And we use taste as, a generic term, but really what we experience when we put food products or beverages in our mouth, it's really a smell, a scent, because, a lot of things we are perceiving is through our sense of smell, and our sense of smell is so important for our food enjoyment and our well-being. But I think the first thing to do is to pause,
Mm-hmm.
be present when
Right.
you eat and just pay attention. And then suddenly you will notice, maybe, you know, yes, the strawberry smell, but maybe there is something a bit cooked, a bit caramelly. And
Mm.
it's more about paying attention first. And the way I teach people how to be more mindful of these moments is to basically, stop, sense, you know, look at where the odor or the aroma is coming from and create this mental association of the product and what you experience and put a label on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more you do that, I call it the nose framework. You notice, you observe, you smell, and you encode, which is, basically record that in your memory.
Yeah.
That's how, you can start pay more attention. And then, if you're a wine lover, that's how you develop your wine vocabulary and sensory repertoire. So you can pick up those smells later on, in your glass of wine.
Absolutely. I love that you just mentioned that because I've talked to John about this many, many times. And actually we've talked about this in other podcast episodes as well. Cause a lot of people are like, oh, like you must be, what is it? Like a super taster or a super sensor or whatever they call some people that are, good with wine and
Hmm?
identifying. And he was like, I don't have any like more skill, like I'm not better or worse than anyone else. I've just done it a lot. I have a lot of
Hmm.
practice. I've tasted a lot of wines. I've smelled. I've, done the research, the work to, and it's fun, very fun research to develop that. Any
Hmm.
kind of anyone can do it. So is that something you would agree? Let's talk about wine here specifically. Does that sound kind of aligned to you? Like we just have to, like you said, pay attention and
Practice, practice, practice.
yeah.
That's what I say, all the time. It's a skill, so you
Yeah.
need to have the fundamentals to start with, and then practice as often as you can.
Yeah.
Pay attention every day. My mentor, Dr. Ann Noble, who was a professor at UC Davis, she says, listen to your nose every day.
Mm.
You walk, you pause, and you smell. And the more you train your sense of smell, the better. And then your sense of taste, and then, the feeling in the mouth. Try to paying attention and practice.
Yeah.
So it's there. You cannot learn how to taste in the textbooks, unfortunately.
Yep. Just have to try the wines, got to do the work or so. Such a
And
bummer,
that's
I
the
know.
thing that's the thing with wine education. When you train for sommelier, yes, you want to taste a lot of wine styles to memorize those differences, but you don't have to taste a lot of wine to develop your sense of
Yeah.
smell. You can practice with whatever you have at home, and that's also, something I teach. You have things in your kitchen, you have things in your household. And even one of my students said the other day, I never pay attention to what's in my garage. And the other day I did the exercise. I never noticed, how many different smells there were in my
Yeah.
garage. And, he's a wrestling lover. So, there are some of those kerosene and, a bit of chemical smells sometimes in wines that are
Yes.
not a defect, but are, a signature of some old wine. So that was a funny story. Yeah.
That's such a great point. Okay, I'm actually so glad you brought that up because as you were speaking a minute ago, something occurred to me. Like I feel like I sometimes have a problem. It's like let's say I'm smelling a wine, right? I feel like I know what I'm smelling, like it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't name it. Or and this is where John is really good. He's like, he gets this, and I'm like, oh my God, that was it. Now I don't know if that's just the power of suggestion or if he actually named it correctly. I'm sure it's a little of both, but if there's anyone here listening that can kind of empathize with that, or they're like, yeah, I want to be
Mhm.
better, or I want to get better at naming what I'm smelling, tasting, and all of that, but I just feel like I kind of blank. I don't know how to name it, or, you know, would you say that that's where the being present and paying attention and things come in, or how could somebody kind of hone in on that and maybe get a little bit better about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, be present is one thing, but it's also getting the technique
Mm.
to not trying to focus immediately on the precise term because, we want to be right.
Right.
So the first thing you will learn with me is that there is no right or wrong answers. What your senses are telling you,
Yeah.
everything is valid. Now, rather than going straight to the very precise term, especially, if you taste with your husband
Mhm.
and, he's going to nail it.
Yeah.
Try to think more in terms of categories. So
Yes.
what is the bigger category? And then, is it more fruity? Is it more spicy? Is it more floral, or something a bit more fermented that reminds you of? And then, you pick a category and then you try to focus further. Of course, it takes a few milliseconds every time, but the more you practice that categorization exercise, the more you can be precise. And you need to train your nose to put the label on the scent. So that's why I love the wine aroma wheel, because that's really what it is. It's not just a list of words. It's a technique to categorize what you perceive from the most generic term, generic category,
Right.
and then to help you, become a bit more precise as you smell the wine or taste the wine to find out. And it's okay if you just as I said, are stuck in the middle of the wine aroma wheel. You can continue to evolve and learn. But
Yeah.
it's totally normal. We never learn to describe scent, and it's never too late to try.
Yeah. And I think it's maybe a little different for all of us. What one person might get,
Mm,
another might not. And I think that's what's really beautiful about wine and a lot of different types of, alcohol, foods. I mean, of course, there's,
mhm.
a lot out there. That's such a wonderful point about the categorization. And actually, that is something John will do. Like if he's, like really more properly going through, if he were to like be more formal about it, like, okay, I'm totally botching this, but he does that, right? Okay, I'm getting red fruit, thinks about it a second, and then you get more specific. So kind of like just filtering is sort of the way I like to think
Mhm.
of it. It's like, and that's a great way. And I think it makes it feel less intimidating too, that we don't have to, like you said, nail it right away. We might not get, ripe strawberry off the top of our heads, right? You're just like, okay, I know for a fact that this is not blue fruit that I'm getting, or it's not stone fruit. It's definitely red fruit. And then, kind of go from there. And I think that maybe takes some of the intimidation out of it a
Yeah,
little bit because yeah, start somewhere.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Start somewhere, and trust your senses. That's the other thing that I always say. Is there is no wrong answer, and then you may disagree, but there are many reasons why you disagree,
sure.
and it's about finding common grounds, maybe on the category, and then you may have more experience with strawberry jam, and John might have more experience with raspberry jam, who knows.
Yeah,
But this is the human nature of perception.
definitely.
Hmm.
Really quick, you mentioned the wheel. Can you talk about that for a second in case anyone isn't familiar with it? But I think I know what you're referring to, and if it's what I'm thinking of, it's very helpful.
Yeah, so the wine aroma wheel was created by Dr. Ann Noble at T. Davis in the mid 80s, and really the goal of the wheel was to help wine professionals be more precise in their aroma descriptions, because they were talking about harmony and balance and great wine, and not using very precise descriptors, because for sensory scientists you really want to have one label for a perception in order to do the work that we do, which is to understand when we compare different clones of the same varietals, how are they perceived different. If they're all fruity, we can't
Right.
we can't really explain the perceived difference.
Yeah.
So we want to be more specific. So she created this wheel, and I know we are on audio, but I just want to show you
Oh, great. Yeah,
show
yeah.
it to
For
you.
those watching the video version of this or on YouTube. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so the wheel has 3 tiers, and at the center of the wheel has like 11 categories.
Okay.
So from fruity, herbaceous, nutty, caramel, etc. And then you have the middle of the wheel with subcategories, and then all the more precise
So
terms.
helpful.
And it's not exhaustive, but again, it's a guide. It's really to take you through the process. And the more you train, you practice
Yeah.
with the process. After that, you don't need the wheel, although, I'm selling it, so I want you to use it. But it's really a great tool to help, people who are beginning in their wine journey to, if they want to learn how to evaluate wine and describe wine. And there has been some research showing that really this process was really helpful, at the beginning of the journey. After, when you train to be a sommelier,
Mhm.
you use other techniques to, to be able to blind taste, wines. But when you start, it's a great tool to start with.
Definitely. I want to quickly touch on, and you can touch on this in terms of working with companies outside of wine if you'd like, or if you want to focus on wine, that's great. I'm just so curious. honestly just like what the work with a company that you would work with like looks like. Like, so if you are, you know, a scientist and you are helping them like to, I guess maybe develop a product. I want to make sure I'm saying this right, but you know, and you're ultimately helping them make sure that, you know, the consumer buys. And I find this very fascinating because I'm on the marketing side, so I really have an appreciation for this in kind of a similar but different way. What does that process look like? Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of sensory consumer science, we work mainly in research and development, and definitely partner with the business side with marketers.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to be involved in different types of projects. So what we call renovation projects. So if you have a product that is on the market and you need to change the formulation for the reason XYZ, usually it's productivity, you want to lower the cost. You want to make sure that the reformulated product doesn't taste different. Otherwise, you would, alienate your consumers.
Right.
If you have, a loyal following in terms of buyers, you don't want them to go to the competition. So you want to make sure that if you renovate the formula, you want the people to follow with you.
Right.
Then you have line extension. So if you have a successful product, but a successful brand, you want to add talking technique XKU, you want to add another version, a flavor version usually. You want to see if the new flavor version is accepted by the consumers and also, is in line with the promise of the brand. So we do a lot of tasting, but we want to make sure that the product is not, at odds with what the brand promises to the consumer.
Right.
Then we have innovation where we try to help, think outside the box and usually work with our colleague marketers or the engineers or the people on the technical side who have this cool technology and want to develop a new product. So really our role is really to help make sure that whatever product is going out tastes great.
Right.
Has, with all the benefits that we promise, nutritional or just taste-wise, and that this product is aligned with what the expectation is from the brand and from the communication. So in the food industry is very entrenched in it's a type of work that is common. In the wine industry, only the largest wineries have embraced that, and I think that there's opportunity, and that's the work I'm promoting or sharing right now. Is even if you have a small winery, you can do this type of tasting to supplement the work of your experts, because your experts are expert in certain things, but they are no longer consumers. So you really want to understand, how your product or your brand resonate with your potential consumers.
Definitely. I definitely think brands and people that are really inundated in a product or a brand or whatever, sometimes they need that outsider perspective a little bit. And that's what, I think, studies and consumer studies and things are very important to make sure that, you're not wasting your resources and you're going in the right direction. And I find everything you just said so interesting because I feel like I've had things, and I'm not even talking about wine now, this is just broad, and I wonder, I'm like, did they do their research before they launched this? Either, like you were saying, either a brand new product or a continuation of, or maybe just like kind of an addition, but not like a huge departure from what they've done in the past. And I don't know, I feel like you can tell when that hasn't been done. It feels misaligned. Or let's say there is like a new flavor or there's something that came out and it's not right. You can just tell, or if it tastes fake or whatever. So would you say like that's kind of where your role is a little bit too, in making sure that, like let's say it is a flavor profile or whatever, that there's accuracy there?
Well, yeah, and that the profile is accepted by the consumers.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to make sure that the flavor profile deliver the type of flavor, that there is no off notes,
Right.
anything that could be objectionable.
Yeah.
But at some point, watermelon was a crazy flavor trend, but there are different nuances of watermelon. And when you put the flavor in different matrices, if it is a sparkling beverage, if it is a juice or juice drinks, the flavors combined with the other flavors and deliver something, of a mixture. So you really want to make sure that you can perceive it, but it's not like too dominant or too suppressed. So there are lots of adjustments. And, of course, the developers can taste the product by themselves and make those decisions. But when it comes to launching, you really want to make sure that you have done your homework. And, we run sensory tests with a panel of 20 people or sometimes less, but we do that we do replication. So we use statistics to make sure that when we say, well, this product meets the brief, basically. We have, it's not one person or two people saying, I like it, I think it's going to work. No, we say, well, it's statistically, we have 95% confidence that it's the right profile. Now we want to make sure that it aligns with the brand, but on the profile side, there's always 5% to be wrong, but it's a business decision later on that other factors can enter in. But that's really what we do. We kind of risk management,
right.
If you will, to make sure that on a large scale, if you launch a product, that we do our due diligence to make sure that the profile meets the need of the consumers.
Yeah, I'd say your odds are pretty good. That no promises, but it's 95% sure this will. That's promising, right? That's so interesting. I have a quick follow-up question. And this might completely vary on what the product is or the company or whatever, but how long does that typically take? This sounds like a pretty intense, fun, but intense process. How long can this take sometimes?
Yeah, well, it can. That's often the pushbacks, so it takes too long. But if you have, a panel, internal panel, if you work with, research suppliers who have their trained panel, the turnaround can be 2 weeks. Depends on the number of products we have to evaluate. Depends on the nature of the sensory test that we are doing. But it's not immediate. You have to plan. There is an experimental design that we put in place, so making sure that we have enough products, that the products are different enough. The way people taste the product needs to be also taken care of. We do everything blind. It's not about guessing the formula. It's about saying do I perceive differences? Okay, if there are differences, how can I describe these differences? And we train our panelists to use a vocabulary that they have agreed upon. And we have physical references to explain, to the marketer, this is what they meant by watermelon. Okay, so this is exactly, so we can make sure that the communication, follows through. And so it can be 2 weeks, it can take 6 months, depending, how many products you have. And as soon as you go towards, running consumer tests, you need to recruit the consumers, you need to set up the tasting. So it can add, another 2 weeks. But, we try to do things in parallel and be efficient. And nowadays, we can go very faster, and it's after that, it's a compromise of the nature of the response that you want. If you want a quick read or if you really want something more thorough, you need to both follow and do the work right.
Yeah, invest that time. I feel like that's important. And especially if there's a lot on the line, or if they're really, depending on the company, rolling this out in a big way or whatever. I mean, that could be a very costly mistake if they don't, take the time and do their research.
Well, think about, going back and forth and, trial and error takes a lot of time. We never really compound for that. But once the sensory test, is set up to avoid those back and forth, usually.
Yeah. I'm just curious, is there a part of this process that you like the most?
Most of my career, I've been working with descriptive panelists, or trying to elicit descriptions for people. And then the most recently, working with consumers and innovating with them. And that's the interaction, with people and trying to understand their needs, their pain points, etc. So as I said in the introduction, although I'm an introvert, I love these connections and try to understand, where we can help the consumers and innovate with them. So co-creation with consumers are very fun exercises.
Exactly.
We show them, options. They give us feedback in the back room. We try to to create some blends that respond to their feedback, and then we go back and say, is it what you wanted, etc. And then this iterative work actually, and imagine doing that with wine blends. I mean, this iterative work can really be very efficient in terms of meeting the consumer needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what's really fascinating about working in the wine industry is I've seen a lot of wineries, usually a lot of bigger ones, create their wines based on what the consumer wants, not necessarily what might be best, right? And
Mm,
it's interesting from that perspective as well. And I
yeah.
think for John and I, definitely we can taste when that's been the
Mm,
case. So we're like, oh yeah, okay, this is meant for the masses, kind of.
well, and you know, internally within our sensory profession, we have a a reflection nowadays that we have recommended products based on liking.
Hmm.
And sweetness is something that we all love, and even in wine.
Certainly in
And there
America.
is nothing wrong to like sweet wine.
Yeah.
But if we take only this dimension when we recommend a product, there is a risk that we only deliver on that dimension, sweetness.
Yeah.
So there is a reflection internally within the profession about, can we go beyond liking? What are the other factors that we need to integrate in the decision matrix? Because liking is important, satisfaction is another thing, and as I said earlier, the alignment with the brand. So I knew where you were going, so I used the word sweetness on purpose.
Yes, that's a big one right now, and I get it. Yeah, the American profile is, but not to call it all of Americans here. It's not all of us, but many
Mhm.
of us, yeah, like the sweetness and like sweeter wines. So it's very interesting, which I think of sodas and things like that. I mean, it's not surprising at all, but yeah, it's been an interesting thing to witness in this industry as well.
I've done consumer tests like back in, the early 2021, 2001, 2002. And, the bigger segment of consumers like sweet wines. I mean, doesn't mean that they wanted, more RS, but it
Right.
meant, fruitier, etc. When they were tested with the brand, they might shift the preference, but the natural preference, it's innate. We like sweet, what
Yeah.
can you say? It's not the fault of anybody,
Yeah.
but it happens, in the wine industry as well as other products. So as developers, we have to be mindful of that as well.
Definitely. Yeah. One thing that just occurred to me too, this is kind of a slight departure, but perfume. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever worked with perfume or perfume companies, but John and I actually on our honeymoon, technically, we went to Grasse and did
Mhm.
a perfume making class. I think it was at Molinard. And you would pronounce that so much more beautifully than I just did. But it was amazing. And it was a really cool
Mm.
experience in terms, outside of, food and wine. I think just again, the sensory experience there and how they have us mixing everything. And I'm sure it's not the exact process that a proper perfumer would go through, but it was, yeah, it was very humbling. And it was actually really cool, like what the kind of finished product
Mhm.
was. I just out of curiosity, have you ever kind of worked in like with perfume and things like that? Or it's just kind of maybe not a similar process, but just there's a lot
Mm.
there too. Because perfume and wine kind of remind me of each other in terms of like, sort of like those top notes and then mid notes and, things like that. So I was just curious your thoughts
Yeah.
on that.
No, I've never worked in perfume. I worked with flavorists in the food
Mm,
industry and, got an appreciation of their extensive training
yeah.
and how they are able to, immediately identify, the aroma compounds and create blends of compounds. So,
Yeah.
one of cool exercise I participated once was flavorist, showing 5 different, paper strip with, a scent on it.
Yeah.
And each smelled very different, from very fruity, very grassy, even something a bit animal. And she put
Mm.
all the 5 strips together. And it's the theme of today. It smelled like strawberry. That was just like an amazing experience. And
You're like, how
if
does
we
this
think about blending, I think that's maybe where the art of winemaking is you
Yeah,
really have to understand your blend legs and do the adjustment based on the perception. So
definitely.
yeah, there are there are a lot of commonalities, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I know one of the things that you are really big on are kind of demystifying wine tasting rituals and just that whole process. Because I understand, and I think this is where the wine industry is struggling a little bit right now. It's struggling for a lot of reasons, but I think some people we with some of the companies that I work for and things have kind of done studies and things, and I think a big theme that many people feel is that wine is old, it's unapproachable, it's too expensive, things like that. And but I know a lot of the work that you do is helping people again kind of demystify that and maybe have some fun with it and just appreciate wine through their senses, right?
Mhm.
So, what are from your as far as your recommendations, like what are some ways that people can maybe do that at home? I think you touched on this maybe a little bit, but is there anything else
Mhm.
that you would recommend to people, like, or even if they're not necessarily in a position to like buy a bottle or multiple bottles of wine at home, but like maybe they're just out to dinner or something, or even at a friend's house, like things that they can do just in their day to day to kind of have that little bit of a ritual or, just enjoy that experience a little bit.
Yeah, I think it depends on the context.
Yeah.
When you're out to visit friends or dining at the restaurant, you want to enjoy your meal, you want to enjoy the moment, and it's not the time to really be the wine judge and evaluate the quality of the wine. So really what is pleasurable is what is the most important, work with the sommelier or whoever, or what I found sometimes, I don't know which wine I want to try, the 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 sommelier, the waiter would kindly give me like 2 or 3 samples, and then I would just taste and select the one I want.
Mhm.
So it's okay to ask. It's
Yeah.
the one thing. It's okay to ask. It's okay to say that you don't like the wine.
Yeah.
And they might change it for you. It's okay to say, well, I think it's corked. I've done that
Mhm.
several times. So that's the first thing. It's okay to say what you think about the wine, and
Absolutely.
because you're not wrong, this is what you experience. And again, there is no true or wrong answer.
Mhm.
When you are a wine student, and that's where I help people, is this, there is all this decorum about the instructor that is very knowledgeable, and then we have learned as kids that the professor is always right.
Mhm.
And we follow the process, and we feel bad when you know we taste or experience something that is not aligned with what the professor says. And that's what I want to break right now,
Yeah.
because in terms of sensory perceptions, our upbringing, our genetics, our cultural backgrounds, all these combined creates the fact that we perceive slightly differently the
Mhm.
wine. I'm very sensitive to sweetness,
Yeah.
so I will always find something very sweet. I tolerate sourness because in Europe we have more sour products, and my friends, American friends, will just say, "Well, it's too acid." But so we have tolerance for different things. We can pick up different notes, and it's okay. I think that's the first thing to be comfortable with. It's okay to have different experiences, and you're never wrong.
Mhm.
And then as you want to learn, I always say, we have wine education, backwards. We should start learning about how to use our nose and our senses,
Mhm.
then learn all of, everything about wine,
Yeah.
and not, what is done right now. So this is what I want to demystify. I mean, there is no myth. It's, I
Yeah.
want people to be at ease with the fact that they can take a glass of wine the way they want. It's okay if they take it by the bowl. If it doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
just enjoy it. And if you are a student of wine, know that you can learn and develop your palate, and you don't have to invest, hundreds of dollars in wine. You can train at home and train according, to very simple sensory practices, and it will help you, on your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned, what was the acronym you used earlier? Was it NOS? It was,
Yeah,
yeah.
nose.
Can you repeat that one more time? I just think that was so nice because one thing I've really taken away from this conversation today is, and I think this is a lot of things, especially in America. This is like globally, but like I want to call out America here because I think we really don't slow down and pause. We're really on the go. Again, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but That's a big thing that I've been trying to do specifically. And like, that's a big thing for John and I too. Like, that's why we love food, drink, and travel. We want to slow down and really pause and enjoy and not be so rushed on to the next thing. Right. So
Hmm.
I think like almost having, I was going to call it kind of like a wellness practice around food and wine. And even if it's not wine, whatever it is in front of us and really, enjoy what we're eating, hopefully. So, is there any just like, actually, before I interrupt myself and you again, what was that acronym one more time?
So the nose framework is notice
Yeah.
any sense. You walk outside, you are in your home,
Yeah.
you notice a smell,
Hmm.
observe where it's coming from, what is the product that is associated with that smell.
Hmm.
Smell it again, so you create that neural connection between what you see, what you recognize as the object source, and the sense.
Hmm.
And then encode. So the encoding is very important. It's how you record that into your olfactory memory. So you
Right.
can snap a photo, take a vocal note, writing, by hand
Hmm.
is, a very efficient way of memorizing. So find a way to create that recording in your brain.
Hmm.
And then, you do that every day. And I have another acronym that I call senses, which is when you compare two wines, let's say you practice at home, you have two glasses of wines.
Hmm.
It's really to contrast, to compare and contrast. So you smell the first wine, you encode, what you smell,
Hmm.
then you pause, and then you smell the other one. So it's comparative tasting,
Yeah.
and as human being, we don't there is no absolute judgment. We cannot say it's absolutely great.
Yep.
We always compare to what we have in our head in terms of benchmark, but when you learn to evaluate wine, it's easier to have like things in front of you
Yeah.
to compare, and that's the best way to start appreciating flavor nuances
Yeah.
between different products.
I love it. You're just expanding our horizons, right? And
Mhm.
getting out of our bubble a little bit and trying new things. And like I said, it's a great just practice in presence, I think, as well. And actually just really, enjoying our life and what we're eating and what we're drinking. And there's so much
Mm.
beauty in that. And there's a lot of science in that too. Apparently, I've learned a lot today. So I love it. I know you mentioned prior to us officially recording, you have some resources that, to share with listeners. So I would love to give you the opportunity to share those.
Yeah, thank you. So depending, where you are in your wine journey, I have a free sensory tasting guide where I take you through the way of, evaluating wine, using a sensory process with an audio recording, so you can hear my French accent as well if it's
Love it.
And I have another guide for people working in the industry that lists, the 5 mistakes that we tend to make in a
Mm,
tasting room that could turn guests away, and how to fix them. So I
love it.
created a page on my website, and it's at innovinum.com/toast,
Okay.
because I had already one for taste, so I said toast.
Love it.
So it's
Very appropriate.
innovinum.com/toast. And I have also a special code for you for the wine aroma wheel, but at your disposal if you have any questions as well.
Amazing. Well, I will definitely make sure that's all in the show notes. And I am I've got to see that 5 mistakes. I am so curious because I bet you anything. I would be like, yes, 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 yes. Or we've at least seen it before. And yeah, I think with just some very, and personally, but also like with brands, it's just these little adjustments we can make to really make sure that we're, getting the most out of these experiences with food and wine
Mhm.
and all of the things. So this has been such a fascinating conversation. I want to thank you so much for your time. I find the work you do so interesting, and I hope everyone here did today. I'm sure everyone learned at least something. But thank you so much, Isabel, for your time. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Tara. It was a pleasure, and I had a lot of fun too. So thank you.